recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program, usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. So self-honesty, rather than self-delusion, turns out to be a major factor in recovery. As a matter of fact, what the Big Book is telling us is that if we are not able or willing to be honest with ourselves, we don't recover at all. And thereby hangs a major tale, because this is not a program for sissies. It takes courage to work the 12 steps. And part of that courage has to come at a time when we need to be honest with ourselves. Now, in this article, Bill equates honesty, and especially self-honesty, with integrity. And there's a wonderful saying that I love, and I pass it on every once in a while, that if I can say of you that you have integrity, I need say no more about you, because then everybody knows you. If I must say about you that you have no integrity, I need say no more, because everybody knows you. So let's see what Bill has to say about this matter of honesty. On page 262, the first full paragraph, a third of the way down the page. Now here is another aspect of the honesty problem. It is very possible for us to use the alleged dishonesty of other people as a most plausible excuse for not meeting our own obligations. I once had a spell of this myself. Some rather prejudiced friends had exhorted me never to go back to Wall Street. They were sure that the rampant materialism and double dealing down there would be sure to stunt my spiritual growth. Because this sounded so high-minded, I continued to stay away from the only business that I knew. When finally my household went quite broke, I woke up to the fact that I hadn't been able to face the prospect of going back to work. What Bill is saying there is that he was deluding himself, not facing the fact that he was lazy, that he was afraid of working, that he didn't want to go back to the one thing he knew how to do, and he was rather enjoying bad health. So he says, I returned to Wall Street after all. And I have ever since been glad that I did. I needed to rediscover that there are many fine people in New York's financial district. Then too, I needed the experience of staying sober in the very surroundings where alcohol had cut me down. Oh, but some of our friends will tell us you got to stay away from old playmates and old playpens. Bill says, no, I needed to have the experience of staying sober in the very surroundings where alcohol had cut me down. I did receive all these benefits and a great deal more. Indeed, there was one colossal dividend that resulted directly from my grudging decision to re-enter the marketplace. It was a Wall Street business trip to Akron, Ohio in 1935 that brought me face to face with Dr. Bob, AA's co-founder-to-be. So the birth of AA itself actually hinged on the fact that I'd been trying to meet my bread and butter responsibilities. Just another one of those slender threads that the beginnings of this fellowship hung upon, one after another, after another, after another. Had any of those threads been cut, we wouldn't be here. There'd be no AA. We must now leave the absorbing topic of self-delusion and look at some of those trying life situations which we have to meet foursquare and head on. Suppose we're handing an employment application and ask, have you ever suffered from alcoholism and were you ever hospitalized? Here we AAs can assuredly make a good report of ourselves. Almost to a man, we believe that nothing short of the absolute truth will do in situations of this type. Most employers respect our fellowship, and they like this rugged brand of honesty, especially when we reveal our membership and its results. Of course, many another life problem calls for this identical brand of forthrightness. For the most part, situations requiring utter honesty are clear-cut and readily recognizable. We simply have to face up to them, our fear and pride regardless. Failing to do this, we shall be sure to suffer those ever-mounting conflicts which can only be resolved by plain honesty. There are nevertheless certain occasions when reckless truth-telling may create widespread havoc and permanent damage to others. Whenever this seems possible, we're likely to find ourselves in a bad jam indeed. We should be torn between two temptations. When conscience agonizes us enough, we may well cast all prudence and love to the winds. We may try to buy our freedom by telling the brutal truth, no matter who gets hurt or how much. But this is not the usual temptation. It is far more probable that we shall veer to the other extreme. We'll paint for ourselves a most unrealistic picture of the awful damage we are about to inflict on others. By claiming great compassion and love for our supposed victims, we're getting set to tell the big lie, and be thoroughly comfortable about it too. When life presents us with a racking conflict like this, we cannot be altogether blamed if we're confused. In fact, our very first responsibility is to admit that we are confused. We may have to confess that for the time being, we've lost all ability to tell right from wrong. Most difficult, too, will be the admission that we cannot be certain of receiving God's guidance because our prayers are so cluttered with wishful thinking. Surely this is the point which we must seek the counsel of our finest friends. There is nowhere else to go. Bill talks about his advisors and how they helped him. And he was very good at that. He sought advice and counsel wherever he had an opportunity to do so. The last paragraph on page 264, last two paragraphs. Let us therefore continue our several searches for self-deception, great or small. Let us painstakingly temper honesty with prudence and love. And let us never flinch from entire forthrightness whenever this is the requirement. How truth makes us free is something that we AAs can well understand. It cut the shackles that once bound us to alcohol. It continues to release us from conflicts and miseries beyond reckoning. It banishes fear and isolation. The unity of our fellowship, the love we cherish for each other, the esteem in which the world holds us, all of these are products of such integrity as, under God, we have been privileged to achieve. May we therefore quicken our search for still more genuine honesty and deepen its practice in all of our affairs. Now in this meeting, if you haven't been with us before, we like to share with each other our thinking, our experiences, any questions we may have about the topic of honesty, how it has affected our lives, any conflicts we might have or doubts, and anything that's corollary to that topic. So we don't have any rules here. You can share as often as you want and as long as you want. Share when the Spirit moves you. We like to use this time productively to help each other to a greater understanding of recovery and all of its facets as we have experienced it ourselves. So who would like to start, please?
You started the reading about how he was debating whether or not he should go back into the world of high finance. I'm a certified chef, and I I started in the cooking business when I was like 16 years old. My first attempt at sobriety was at 25 years of age, and it occurred out in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And I heard a lot of things about like people, places, and things. You sit in the barber's chair long enough, your hair's going to get cut. Blind men don't go to movie theaters, you know, and therefore the restaurant industry was a people, place, and thing for me, and it was to be avoided. The nightlife, you know, the after work, what do you do after work? I usually got off of work like, you know, 1 o'clock in the morning, and everybody went to the bar 100 feet away from the restaurant, you know, and that was a pattern. And I had it convinced in my mind that it was something to be avoided because it was a trigger, you know, one of those treatment facility words, you know, triggers, you know. And you read in the article about how, I guess, you know, Bill went ahead and did it anyway because that was what he wanted, you know, that's what he knew, and he was on a different, I guess, spiritual plane, if you might. And I think I recall reading somewhere else in that big book that, you know, there's no reason for you not to go anywhere. You know, being free from alcohol, you can go anywhere on this planet, provided you have good reason to do so. You know, so maybe my thinking was a little wrong. Maybe I heard the wrong things. You know, consequently, I did go out and start a new career. I went back to school, you know, and received a degree in something else. And I haven't returned to that field in almost 10 years.
Yeah, thanks. You'll find that on page 101 in the big book in chapter 7. And what it tells us is that we can go anywhere and do anything that other people can do, so long as we are spiritually fit, and so long as we have proper motive. So we get to live a normal life. We don't have to hide out from life. We can be in bars, we can go to whoopee parties, we can do anything we want to do. If we're spiritually fit, we'll be safe and protected. I mean, why? Safe and protected means across the board. Why? Because the problem's been removed. It doesn't exist for us anymore. It's gone. And that remains that way so long as we stay spiritually fit. And so that's the only proviso. And otherwise, we would have to say to a newcomer, your life's over, bud. You know, you can't do any of the things that normal people do. You're going to have to hide out from booze and hide out from people who drink. And you can't go around drinking. You can't even be reminded of it at all. Well, that's, and there's, see, the problem that you face is that so many meetings, so many groups are burdened with human solution. And a human solution sounds right, but it's not, because it's antithesis to the spiritual solution. And the spiritual solution is the only solution we have. If the human solution worked, if all the little rules and regulations worked, the stuff like you find in Living Sober, which is a scurrilous little book, it's probably got more people drunk than anything else, because it doesn't have to do with recovery. It has to do with human solutions. It's treatment center stuff. And so if you want to know whether something is right or not, ask, where is that in the big book? And where's God in the equation? If it's not in the book and God's not there, forget it. Makes it simple. Who's next?
I don't have a book with me, but I'm just listening, and I hope what I heard was correct in terms of what the reason that Bill didn't want to go back to Wall Street and wanted to lay around and be lazy and everything was because maybe, I'm not sure because I didn't read it, is that he was swindled by other people and that the pain was maybe too much to bear and he didn't want to go back and be part of that scenario. If that's what I didn't hear, then what I really want to share is that I had a situation where I was swindled out of a large sum of money, and I'm just trying to come to acceptance in terms of living in a spiritual solution. And like what I heard was that when I was asking for prayers and everything, the prayers were of all different types of messages. And not until I talked to other people and really accepted and come to grips with the terms of that, yes, I probably played a fault in that conclusion, that it just hurts so desperately that how could I, set myself up for such a bad fault? And at times I can rationalize it and realize it, accept it and turn it over to God, and other times I guess the devil comes back in and interrupts my thoughts. I know there is a spiritual solution. I know that there is a reason for everything. I have to go through this pain, and it's difficult. But I just want to say that through prayer, meditation, going to meetings, trying to help someone else, can I ask you a question? Thanks for letting me share.
Thank you. Who's next?
I'm just, I'm kind of grateful that I don't have to lie anymore. I was a professional liar. I mean, I believe myself after all the lies. And the more I lied, the deeper I got in. It was part of my alcoholism and addiction. I couldn't, I had to lie because the way I was living was an unfit, unspiritual life. I was stealing, I was scamming, and like when I first, in the beginning of my recovery, I had a hard time telling old people, old girlfriends, what I was doing now. And, they were asking me where I was, and I told them, well, I was out of town for 10 months, and I at first lied to them because I didn't want to really tell them that I was in AA or NA, whatever, and I was kind of like ashamed of, what I was doing, and it really hindered my recovery. And then I got honest and told them what happened, and because of my honesty, it freed a lot of things in my life. And there's times when if I go for a job interview and stuff, that I fill an application, and I still have a hard time telling them that I have a problem with drugs and alcohol, because sometimes I feel like it's really none of their business, and that they're going to be discriminatory towards me. And to this day, I still feel like sometimes people don't understand. And then I look at it another way, that if I do tell them the truth, it's meant to be, and whatever happens is going to happen, and it'll make me stronger if I get that job and tell them that it'll be what it's supposed to be. But there's times when, still today, I've got almost 11 months in the program, and there's times when I'll be talking to my parents or something, and I'll they'll ask me a question, and I'll go back to their old behavior, and then I'll kind of revert back and say, no, that's not true. And I feel like they're look at me like I'm crazy, I'm like, no, that wasn't true what I said. And it's I don't know what pushes me to tell the truth. It's I feel like I was so full of lies out there. I was a pathological liar, a total pathological liar, and I was good at it. But all that behavior and stuff is made me very, very just spiritually unfit. Not that I'm so spiritually fit now, but I feel like I'm on the right path if I can just work the honesty part of the program. And the reason I was so dishonest with everyone in my life, girlfriends, was because I was scared that they wouldn't love me or like me anymore. Because if I told them who I really was and I was honest with them, I was so scared of that rejection. And, you know, today it's like I'm still scared of rejection. And I'm still scared of being honest with people. But I don't really have much of a choice because when I'm dishonest, it's very addictive to me to be dishonest because like once I'm dishonest, I'll be dishonest again, and I'll be dishonest again, and I'll make up stories and lies and all kinds of shit. So, you know, being honest is like important to me. But it's not easy. There's no way it's easy, especially, you know, it's like I should go to Liars Anonymous because of all the lies I've said in my life. But I believe for me, you know, you were sharing in that meeting, you know, and I appreciate I've seen it like 4 times already, and I really get a lot out of it. It's something that I've been missing in my recovery is listening to someone that, you know, doesn't really preach, but just tells it the way it is. And you were saying about is your soul or something really, you know, like, are you really willing to save your soul? Are you worth it? Something like that. And, you know, for a long time, I didn't feel like I was worth it. You know, I used drugs and alcohol every day for 20 years. And, you know, today, I feel like, you know, I'm, you know, pretty much worth it. You know, there's days when I don't feel like I'm worth it. That's like a different thing for me. That's like self-esteem that I'm working on. And, that's being honest, actually. Because, you know, there's days when I feel like, you know, is this worth it? You know, but, you know, it's like, if I take it a day at a time, for me, it just makes it a lot easier. And, you know, it's like someone said to me that the lie is dead, you know, and we do get better, we do recover. And I don't know, man, like for me the war's over. And I don't have to lie anymore. And I don't have to lie because it's like there's nothing to lie about. It's like today I'm doing like the right thing. And that's I don't know, that's it. Thanks.
Sure. I like the article a lot, the parts that we read. You know, I like to say what the gentleman mentioned. I always did things because I wanted to be accepted and approved of, you know. Sometimes even when I'm sharing, I watch what I'm saying, you know, because I'm still looking for acceptance and approval from the group. And what's interesting that I see in the paragraphs we read was, we're talking like this is right after, or like 6 months, within 6 months after he gets out of the hospital, gets sober. Am I correct with that, Jim, in assuming that? Because you're talking about he winds up in Ohio, in Akron, in 35, and meets Dr. Barb. So he goes back to Wall Street, pretty much within his first year of sobriety. Am I correct with this?
Well, sure, it was within the first 6 months.
Right. So what's interesting to me is when it talks about in the big book how Ebby helped him in the hospital with what then was the Oxford Group's program. And the profound effect it must have had that he was able to go back to Wall Street and probably not be a saint, of course.
Well, he was able to go back, he just wanted.
Right.
So he was using excuses.
Right.
But then he ran out of money, so he had to go.
What's getting me is when he fails on that trip, that business trip. You know, it might have been worse if he had succeeded. You know, because when he fails,
Well, it was,
winds up with Dr. Ball.
it was another one of those slender threads upon which this whole thing was suspended. Not only did he have to go to Akron and do business, but he had to fail in business. Because when he back at the Mayflower Hotel, and the choice was between going in a bar and getting drunk, he was 6 months sober at that time, or the message board was right in front of him with the names and phone numbers of the pastors of various churches. And he had to make a choice to go in and get drunk or try to find somebody he could help. He chose the latter. He also had to pick out this one guy who happened to be the pastor of this one church, who happened to know Henrietta Sieberling, who happened to know Dr. Bob, and knew that Bob was a drunk. The pastor was in, Henrietta was in, and Dr. Bob was in. And he was able to go call upon Dr. Bob. And just before all of this happened, another slender thread is he had met with Dr. Silkworth, and Silkworth had straightened him out on what he was doing wrong and trying to get people sober. If you read chapter 7, you'll find the first 7 pages are what Silkworth told Bill he had to do. They've been expanded, of course, into the big book way of working with a newcomer. But the basic ingredients were there, and Bill didn't know that, but Silkworth did. So the first time Bill had a chance to practice that was when he went to Akron and ran into Dr. Bob. Now you can see over and over and over again all the slender threads. All of these things had to be there. They couldn't be broken. They had to happen in the order in which they happened, or we wouldn't be here.
I thank you for that, and I'm aware of the church directory, the phone calls he made, and the way he was trying to evangelize instead of telling his experience. What I'm getting at is the profound effect of going through that program that he went through, those actions he took with Evie in the hospital, that he was able to go back to Wall Street, to fail, and carry forth with that. I equate my whole life with whenever, and this goes back to what you were mentioning in the Big Book meeting, about the material success and seeking that. And I myself am fearful, and I'll tell you why. To go back to sales and make a lot of money. And I'll tell you why, because I'm not spiritually fit. And I know that. And I've done it in the past. And I put that ahead of the program of recovery. And I could see how, after Bill had done the work that he did do up to the point where he did get to Akron, how that carried him through. And that's all I wanted to get out of that. I was equating it to me always chasing that fast buck. Now that's what Wall Street was a fast buck. But he knew how to do it. He was good at it. And to have someone tell you not to do what you're good at, and try to put that on you, I don't agree with what those people were telling me. You know, and I see where the power of his God and his higher power saw him through. His belief in that power. That's all.
Well, when you're spiritually fit, John, you can go or stay away. It's up to you.
Yes.
You get to live your life if you're spiritually fit,
Thank you.
because the problem's been removed. If tempted, you recoil from it. I mean, and all that's real clear in the book, isn't it? So we don't have to fear life. We don't have to fear success. Hell's bells. I've been rich and I've been poor, and I promise you I like rich a hell of a lot better. I like a little saying, whether you're rich or poor, it's nice to have money. So when we start thinking in terms of triggers for drinking, we might as well go right back to treatment center. We drink because we're alcoholics, and because we have no power over alcohol, and when our brain says drink, we snap to attention and say, yes sir, and we drink. And you can take all the damn triggers you want, shake them up into a big can, pour them out, pick any one you want, doesn't matter. We don't need any kind of trigger. All we need is the fact that we're alcoholics and we have no power over alcohol. And the triggers are irrelevant as long as we're spiritually fit. It doesn't matter where we are. The Big Book says you can go to the most sordid spot on earth on an errand of 12-step, and you'd be perfectly safe. That's right. If we don't understand that, we don't understand what the hell's going on here. But this is something which is a series of absolutes. And we are absolutely protected from alcohol when we're in God's pocket. And if we're not in God's pocket, we're absolutely unprotected. It's that simple. Marilyn.
I'm Marilyn, I'm an alcoholic. This reminded me when I first came into the program, I was a waitress, and everybody, almost every single person said, you know, you gotta get out of there, you can't be a waitress, there's alcohol being served. And I wasn't that keen about coming in here in the first place, and now you're telling me I have to quit my job when all I knew was waitressing. And I was really distraught. So then there was this old timer, Ray, that was in here, and he said, Marilyn, you don't have to quit your job. He said, you're a waitress, that's all you know? He goes, be a waitress. He said, but, come to meetings, and he goes, and while you're a waitress, look for the good. He said, look at the people that are drinking, and learn from, see what they're doing. So sure enough, I looked at the people that were drinking, and there were very few people when I was a waitress that drank, that I noticed, that drank like me. And there were really very few women. And I used to think, and because I would listen to what the women would say, and it reminded me of me when I was drunk. And I always thought that people were laughing with me, and then I realized when I got sober and I watched these people drinking in the bar, that people were laughing at these girls. And so it really taught me a really valuable lesson. And I did that for about a year sober, and then I got a job. Then I got another job, but it took that long. I was in too much fear to get a job when I first came, another kind of job when I first came in. I had to do what I already knew. So anyway, this time coming in though, I've been put in a position where I've had to make a lot of decisions about jobs. I had 4 or 5 jobs my first year, and all in the telephone sales field. And every decision that I made, I tried to put against the test of when the spiritual malady is overcome, we recover physically and mentally. So I put every job, what would be the best spiritual thing to do? Not which job pays the most money, but which job would be best spiritually? Am I going to be able to get to meetings? Is this against my convictions? Does this seem like something honest or whatever? And it seems like that's what Bill said. In any industry, there's going to be bad places and good places, or there's going to be good stockbroker bridges and then bad ones. And so he was going by the fact that there were some bad ones, and if people were saying all stockbrokers are evil or whatever, so he's like, yeah, whereas some of them were good. So, he opened his mind to the fact that he knew it and he was looking for the good ones. So it's the same thing that I did this year. I tested everything to, when the spiritual malady is overcome, I tried to make all my decisions on a spiritual basis, because I believe that God is taking care of me physically, and I can't put my dependence on finances, because anything I put ahead of God will disappear. So I have to put my dependency on God, and then everything will fall into place. And it's worked out good with the jobs. So far, so good. Thank you.
Thank you, Marilyn. Yes, ma'am.
I was scared, to be honest, when I first came in. I've heard how it works, and said there are those who with grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest, and I didn't know if I could. I really didn't. I had lived my life most of the years of my adult life, at least based on things that weren't so. It wasn't necessarily conducive to good social standings to be honest, with people. It wasn't okay to say you were afraid if you were afraid. It wasn't okay to say that you were broke if you were broke, just didn't happen, so I was really more afraid, to be honest, based on what other people would think of me if I was. And that was all based on fear,
Sure.
you know, of that not being accepted, not being liked, not being approved of, if I was honest. So, I don't know, God graced me with a really wonderful sponsor. The first lady who grabbed me, and she had a lot of years, and she was not a Nazi, you know. What she did was she really helped me a great deal, and she loved me and supported me. She never said, "Oh, you're doing this wrong." Her thing was, as long as I was making the effort to do it, she just thought that was the greatest thing. So I learned a lot from her, a lot, on how to be with other people. She taught me something that I had never heard in AA, and that was that honesty without kindness is called cruelty. Holy cow, what a concept, you know, because I don't know about y'all, but I know about me, my mouth can be quite mean, you know, with my honesty. So some things that I had to say really didn't need to be said. You know, yeah, it was honest, but it didn't need to be said. It was just being mean-spirited. So I learned a lot about honesty in here, and I had a lot of opportunity to practice it. You know, a lot. I'll tell you what, when I have the best relationship with God, when my spiritual condition is at its best, is when I feel the best. And when I have that safe, secure feeling inside is when I'm doing the right thing. Not the next right thing. I don't know where that came from. But the right thing. I know the difference between right and wrong. It says in the big book, we all know fundamentally what it is. So when I'm doing it, I'm the most comfortable in my skin. You know? And really coming in here, that's what I wanted. I wanted to be comfortable in here. I was tired of thinking all my life, gee, I wanted to be like you, or I wanted what you had, or what they had, or whatever. My best days are when I'm real comfortable in here. And I know I'm good with God. I know that I've done what I'm supposed to do that day. I've made my peace with Him. And that's daily. It says a spiritual condition based on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. Maintenance means to me every day I maintain it. I've gotten it, I've achieved it, I've got God's grace, and now I need to maintain it. So I go out and it says we practice these principles in all our affairs. All our affairs means family, work, play, all areas. So if I'm spiritually fit in all areas, I'm pretty content. I'm not out chasing the mighty buck to make me happy. I'm not chasing the Mercedes to make me happy. I'm content with whatever is. And if those things come, that's nice. But that's not my whole focus. So,
You ever notice that the days when you feel the most spiritually fit are the days when you feel the most grateful? Turns out that gratitude is a perfect gauge of spiritual fitness. The days you feel ungrateful, you can count on it. You're not spiritually fit. Dr. Dave.
I think that honesty is one of those supreme qualities that is necessary for me to stay sober. It's up there with the quality of love. And in this article, Bill Wilson expressed how he could delude himself. And I've had this experience, and I will probably continue to have it, where I may think I'm doing something that, you know, this is okay, or this is right, or I'm being honest, and it's not honest, or it's not really the right thing, or maybe it's a selfish motive. And he mentions himself talking to somebody else. And I think one of the great things about the program is that this element of where I could talk to someone, a confidant, a sponsor, somebody that is not judgmental, or is accepting, or is going to have a an unconditional, not emotionally involved response where I could share things and run things by somebody. Because I'm an imperfect human being. If my brain is a computer, I know it's not perfect. It doesn't, like an adding machine that's not perfect. It may not come up with the correct exact total of something. Sometimes running it by somebody is very important. I know if I'm going to practice the 10th step, I got to do this inventory, and you get to this thought of, you admit it to God, to ourselves, and another human being. So sometimes there are some things I just have to say to somebody else. And it's very important to have that. And it's also important that I know that I could say that to somebody that's confidential. Because some things you don't want to hear them again around the room. And it's also like this thought of going to the woodshed. I know if I would tell things to my parents, for instance, they could go ballistic. I couldn't really sit down and say, I'm having this problem, taking drugs or something like that. I could never discuss that with them. But having a confidant, I can do that. And it helps me to be honest. It helps me, prayer does too, and practicing it does. But I recognize that it's like that. One of the four cardinal defects: selfish, dishonest, resentful, fearful. Dishonest is a thing that's going to try to get up in there again in me. It's just almost like a natural thing for me to go back to that unless I work on it. And so that's an aid to me, and I'm thankful that the program has this, and I can do that. And if I don't practice that, I don't have somebody that I can talk to, I'll hold it in, I'm going to have a problem with it. So that's all I wanted to share.
Thank you, David. Who's next?
Two comments to this. One is an addendum to what Mitch was saying before about how for 20 years he had been continuously running and taking something and/or misrepresenting himself to his girlfriends and others. And in an effort not to do that, I had taken it one step further and had been a true isolator because I knew I was going to be doing that after having a short relationship. It just got to the point where I didn't want to misrepresent myself. I didn't know exactly where I wanted to go or what I wanted to do with the relationship. I didn't want people to get hurt, including me. And since I was also afraid of them rejecting me, and deep down inside, when you speak about the true honesty, self-honesty, I was oftentimes looking at myself and thinking I was rejecting myself. Was I worthy of having a good relationship, of knowing where I wanted to go? And I was a kaleidoscope of emotions, and if you don't know where you're going, then truly you're going nowhere. And I was going in a circle, and so then when people would start, well, where are we going and what are we doing? And if you don't know, and you really don't know, then to go ahead and misrepresent that and drag it along, that just leads people on, and I didn't want to go ahead and do that. And I was just fearful of getting in, quote, over my head because I didn't know where it was going. And that's a shame because it wasted many, many years. And so isolation and drugs and things like that, etc. And it's a lonely existence, terribly lonely existence, and I wasted many, many years. And for that, I'm ripped up inside, and I'm hoping that going through the steps, etc., that certainly by having a more spiritual existence, that a lot of that into the future is going to certainly improve. Because, I mean, for me, that's as emotional a bottom as you can get. Is you have a lot, I believe, to offer, and yet not doing it. So certainly, what else is there? Our biggest asset is time, and I'm surely wasting a lot of it. So the other thing that I wanted to point out is just that you've showed us by doing the steps that if you go away and you have a bad scuzzy pool and the pool gets all full of algae and leaves and all that stuff, and the whole idea of the steps is to find out what doesn't work, clean out the pool, fill it full of clean water, get it nice, and then that's like steps 4, 5, 6, and 7 as I get to know you, and then the maintenance steps of now once you've got the pool full of nice crystal clear blue water, now the maintenance steps of 10, 11, and 12 is checking it every day to make sure that it doesn't get all full of scum and algae and leaves and dirt, and keep it nice and clean. And it seems like with what was going on in here, this is exactly, what wasn't happening with the Oxfordians when they didn't have their like step 10. No, they were just gonna be perfect. And here Bill is alleging to, wait a minute, we're not perfect. I am a human being. I am gonna go ahead and make mistakes. Okay, and this is how we're gonna go ahead and correct it, by being honest and acknowledging that we do make mistakes, and let's clean them up in I think it would be in step 11, and taking the inventory and going through that.
Mhm.
And okay, let's take care of it now. Let's not let the pool get too out of control. Let's go ahead and take care of it now. And quite bright on his part to be able to say that. We're always going to veer off because that's the human nature, is to be able to go ahead and do that. But let's go ahead and correct it as soon as we possibly can. And that's what he was saying in here in this thing about honesty.
That's right, and well, let's keep in mind, guys, that there's a differential here between honesty with others and with the world at large, and self-honesty. When we read the big book and we parse the sentences and we understand what it's really saying to us, it's telling us that the sine qua non, the bottom line of recovery, is that we be honest with ourselves. Because there are going to be times that the big book recognizes, and Lady pointed out, where honesty may be brutal and brutally harm somebody else. We're not permitted to do that. But this does not mean that we must not be entirely honest with ourselves. So we have to separate these two. And they talk about this being an honest program. I'm not sure that anybody really knows what they're talking about when they say that. As if somehow or another we are expected to be dead honest at every step of the way, at every occasion, regardless of the circumstances or the consequences to others, and that's not true. If you read the 9th step in the big book, you find it's not true at all. There are many times when we cannot be honest with others because to do so would be to harm them. And there's an overriding spiritual principle which pointed out that we are not permitted to do anything to harm another person. And by the way, there's a corresponding spiritual principle that we're not permitted to let other people harm us. The reason for that is that every time we let somebody else hurt us, we get blocked off from God. And that's the last thing that we can allow to happen. We just have to learn to say, stop right there. No, no, no. We'll have none of this. If it doesn't stop, we got to get away. Just keep in mind that honesty, in terms of the necessity for honesty for recovery, is self-honesty, and that we are blessed with this and we learn what we need to know when we do our 5th step. Honesty is not a part of the 1st step, or the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th step. Honesty is in the 5th step, and you'll find a reference to that on page 73. And it's in the 5th step, when we get honest with another person about ourselves, that we learn the kind of honesty we have to have that will carry us the rest of the way. Anyway, guys, it's time for us to close the meeting. I want to thank all of you so much for being here. And we need to pay the rent, if you don't mind. And then we'll say the Lord's Prayer together, and we'll call it an evening. Oh, 6 down. down, Tommy, and 2 to go.
Do it all over again.
Then we start all over. How are you doing? Everything okay? Hmm? Oh, okay, good. Okay, let's let this circle represent the unity of our fellowship. Let's have a moment of silence for those who are still suffering. And then we'll say the Lord's Prayer together. I remind you again that in the stairway group we don't say anything after we say amen. Thank you. Lord's Prayer. Our Father,
Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
thanks all for being here. See you next week. God willing, with Chris
Thank you.
O'Brien.